The silence wasn't an accident. It was manufactured. Heaven has been waiting for this moment because now the lie is collapsing. You, the one listening right now, you were not supposed to survive. Not spiritually, not mentally, and maybe not even physically. From the moment your spirit entered this realm, someone marked you, not with favor, but with fear. Because even before you knew who you were, they knew what you carried. You were born with something they couldn't replicate, a light that can't be duplicated, a destiny that can't be reassigned. So they came for you, not openly, because the chosen are rarely attacked directly. No, they used subtle weapons, rejection, abandonment, lies whispered about you behind doors you didn't even know existed, doors you were never invited to open. They didn't want to fight you. They wanted to erase you, make your voice irrelevant, your presence forgettable, your future expendable. But Archangel Michael says they almost succeeded. But I stood in the breach, I intercepted the strike, and I preserved the record heaven wrote about you. You were hidden, yes, but not abandoned. You were delayed, yes, but not denied. Everything they tried to erase is still written, not on paper, not in memory, but in flame, holy fire that cannot be stolen or smeared. And now, the wind has shifted. What was covered is being revealed. The spiritual fog they wrapped around your life is starting to lift. You can feel it, can't you? The tension, the flicker, the strange sense that something big is about to be uncovered. It's not just in your head. Heaven is leaning closer now. The hour has begun, and Archangel Michael is no longer standing back. They tried to silence what was divine, Michael says, but now the divine speaks louder. And you've been summoned to remember, not just who you are, but what they feared. Because even as they tried to bury you, they couldn't stop the seed from remembering how to grow. Long before you ever felt resistance in the natural, something was happening in the unseen. You weren't just born into conflict, you were targeted before birth. Archangel Michael says this was never random. You were born at the intersection of prophecy and war, and somewhere along the way, an ancient alarm was triggered in the spirit. When your soul entered this plane, darkness flinched. Not because of what you said, but because of what you carried. That's when the surveillance began. Not from people, but from principalities, familiar spirits, watchers in the shadows, entities that don't care about your appearance or resume, only about your blueprint. Because there's something in your DNA that echoes divine origin. And that's why they couldn't just attack you like everyone else. They needed permission. They needed legal ground. They needed you to self-destruct. So they whispered. They sent dream distortions. They let the wrong people get close. They delayed your timing, hoping you'd give up. They engineered cycles of loss, so precise it felt like fate mocking you. And while you wondered if you were cursed, Michael was recording, watching, guarding your file. You have no idea how many strikes I've blocked, he says, how many arrows I snapped midair, how many altars I crushed with my foot. Heaven was never silent, just strategic. You weren't being ignored, you were being preserved. But now the timer has reached a threshold. Michael says the next phase has begun, and the darkness, it's not guessing anymore, it knows who you are. You felt it recently, the pressure that makes no sense, the strange fatigue, the unexplainable delay, the spiritual tightness around your chest. That's not random. That's surveillance turning into activation. They're trying again. One final push. One last erasure attempt before the gates open. But Michael is not backing down, and heaven is not negotiating. You don't have 40 days. You don't even have 4, Michael warns. You have 1 hour to rise, or fall like they hoped you would. You've been answering to names that were never yours. Labels, wounds, expectations. But heaven never changed your name. They just tried to make you forget it. Archangel Michael says the first step to erasing a destiny is erasing identity. Not by deleting your memories, but by replacing them. So they told you who you were. They renamed you with pain. They called you too much, too sensitive, too different, not enough. Each time you tried to rise, they stamped a new word across your forehead. Failure, burden, outcast, unworthy. And with each label, a piece of your original design was blurred. Michael watched it happen. He saw how they twisted your reflection, how they used mirrors of manipulation, friends that gaslit you, lovers that used you, relatives that planted doubt and smiled while doing it. They didn't just want to break you, they wanted to reprogram you. But it never worked, because deep inside your spirit, the original name never died. It's been whispering to you in dreams, in random flashbacks, in strange moments where you suddenly feel older than your years, like your soul remembers something your mind can't place. The name you were given in heaven, Michael says, is not lost. It is sealed, and it's time to retrieve it. That's why lately you've felt disoriented. It's not confusion. It's the sound of chains breaking. It's the moment right before an old lock gives way. The fog that's been on you, that heaviness, that numbness, that I don't even know who I am anymore feeling. It's cracking. And now Michael is reaching forward, hand extended, scroll in hand, your real name glowing with divine ink. Not the one the world gave you, not the one pain tried to carve into your bones, but the one the Creator whispered into light when you were formed. Read it, Michael says, and rise with it, because the next attack is not against your life, it's against your memory. They don't fear your talent, they fear your remembrance. And now that the veil is thinning, you will either reclaim what was always yours or allow the final layer of forgetting to take hold. There's something dangerous about misplaced authority. When someone wears what was meant for you, heaven takes notice. Archangel Michael says your name was not just an identity, it was an access key. In the spirit realm, your purpose has permissions. Gates open to your name. Miracles move by your signal. Doors close when your assignment changes. But someone else has been trying to use your key. Michael reveals this has been happening silently, in the background. Not through magic, but through deception. A soul near you, past or present, learned to mimic your frequency. They didn't copy your voice. They copied your wounding. They studied your patterns. They echoed your language. And the spirit realm began to respond. Not because they earned the authority, but because they knew how to impersonate pain. Heaven never authorized them, but pain does strange things in the invisible. And suddenly you began to feel blocked. Opportunities that once opened, jammed. People began calling someone else what used to be spoken over you. They got the invitation, they stood in the spotlight, but they never carried the weight of your fire. This is identity theft of the spirit, Michael says, and the breach ends now. There's a reason you felt angry for no clear reason, a reason you've been restless, waking in the middle of the night, heart racing. It's because your spiritual code is being recovered. Heaven is relocking what you never meant to share. But this isn't just a recovery, it's a reactivation. Michael is shifting access, and every gate that opened to someone else in your name is being shut, because favor without authority is illegal, and imitation is never anointed. You may not have seen who it was, you may not even suspect, but your spirit knows. It's been screaming in silence, and now Michael is enforcing justice, not with words, but with fire. I am sealing what is sacred again, he says, and no counterfeit spirit shall pass through what bears your name. So don't be surprised if you suddenly feel things collapse around people you used to admire. Don't be shocked if platforms fall. It's not punishment, it's restoration. Because what was yours was always yours. They didn't win. They just borrowed time, and time just ran out. Heaven can recover what was stolen, but only you can reclaim what you abandoned. Protection was divine, but obedience is a choice. The breach has been sealed. The counterfeit keys have been revoked. The code they tried to override has been restored to you. But now the question turns inward. Michael isn't just guarding you anymore. He's waiting for your answer. What will you do with what was rescued? He asks. Because heaven didn't fight to save you just to watch you sit in silence. You've been under spiritual surveillance. You've been defended. But now you're being deployed. You may not feel ready, but readiness was never the criteria. Willingness is. And yet, fear has crept in like fog. Not the loud fear, the soft kind, the type that whispers, what if I step out and nothing changes? What if I try again and fail again? What if I'm not who heaven says I am? But Michael interrupts that fear. He doesn't debate it, he silences it. You don't have the luxury of doubting anymore, he says. Too much has been spent. Too much has been moved on your behalf. The clock is ticking louder now, and it's not a threat. It's a holy invitation. This is the hour where the chosen must choose back. You're not being asked to conquer everything in one breath. You're being asked to take the first step with sacred defiance. The kind that says, even if my knees shake, I will still rise. Even if I feel unworthy, I will still answer. Even if I don't see the full map, I will still move. Because obedience is not submission to fear, it's alignment with fire. And every time you delayed, heaven waited. Every time you second-guessed, Michael held the line. But now the moment has shifted. Heaven is no longer holding your place, it's calling your movement. Get up, Michael says. Not because you're strong, but because you were chosen. And chosen ones don't wait for perfect clarity. They obey the whisper and move mountains with it. So take the first step, even if it's shaky, even if it's small. Because heaven never asked for perfection, only permission to move through you. Obedience doesn't just open doors, it exposes shadows. And when you move in divine alignment, everything not built for your light will begin to fall away. You've started moving again. And maybe you thought that once you did, peace would come instantly. Breakthrough would flood in, every delay would reverse, but instead, people start acting strange. Doors you thought would open stay locked, certain voices go silent, support starts to vanish. This is not a sign you're doing something wrong. This is a sign the spiritual atmosphere is clearing out the counterfeit. Michael says, when heaven redeems a name, the realm around that name begins to respond. Not everyone who clapped for you was aligned with you, and not every connection was meant to cross into the next phase. The moment your steps aligned with divine order, a signal went out in the spirit. It didn't just summon angels, it shook parasites loose. Attachments you didn't even realize were leeching your momentum. Some relationships will shift without explanation. That friend who always got you may now feel distant. That person who cheered your growth may suddenly mock your fire. Some spaces you used to find comfort in now feel cold. Some platforms you were just about to break through on will shut. Not because you're cursed, but because your obedience purifies your path. Michael says, this is the purge before the placement. What is falling off now could not survive your rise. If it stayed, it would poison what's next. So let them fall. Let what's leaving leave. Don't mourn rooms heaven has already walked out of. This is the weight of being chosen. Not everyone gets to come with you. Not everything gets to survive your transformation. And no, you don't need to go explain yourself. Not to the ones who left, not to the ones who don't see it. They were never meant to understand this level. What looks like loneliness is actually alignment, Michael says. What feels like loss is actually clarity. So don't panic, don't beg, don't chase what was comfortable. This season is not about comfort, it's about consecration. Because where you're going, only the unshaken can walk beside you. The greatest threat to darkness is not a warrior with weapons. It's a chosen one who finally realizes what they're carrying. You're not just stepping back into motion, you're stepping into recognition. And recognition is dangerous. Because for so long they kept you confused, made you believe you were weak, unqualified, random, replaceable. They told you that your voice was too much, that your dreams were too unrealistic, that your passion was too intense. But Archangel Michael says that intensity was never a flaw. It was the mark of what you carry. You don't just carry potential, you carry presence. You carry answers. You carry breakthrough for bloodlines, healing for generations, fire for dry places. That's why you've been fought so fiercely, because what's inside you wasn't meant to stay inside. It was meant to erupt. But if the enemy could keep you distracted, tired, questioning yourself, then the eruption would never come. So they launched attacks at your confidence, at your memory, at your rest, not because they feared you, but because they feared who you'd become if you ever woke up. And now you're waking, not because you read the right book, not because you followed the right guru, but because heaven shook the veil loose, and you finally looked beneath the noise. What you're carrying is holy, heavy, volcanic. You've been walking around like a seed, but inside you're a whole forest waiting to ignite. Michael says, this is the reason they came for you so young. This is why your childhood felt like war. This is why you were attacked before you ever succeeded, because they saw the weight of what you'd release. You've been misunderstood because you're multidimensional. You've been underestimated because your glow was hidden under grief. But now the fire's catching, the understanding is unlocking, and the spiritual weight of your life is too loud to ignore. You don't just carry calling, you carry consequence. Heaven doesn't just move through you, it moves because of you. This is not about what you'll do, Michael says. It's about what your existence has already shifted. So no, this isn't the time to shrink. This isn't the time to explain yourself to the small-minded. This is the hour to accept. I was born marked. I was born burning. And they were right to be afraid. Restoration was never the end goal. Heaven didn't rescue you to return you. Heaven rescued you to reposition you. Michael says the tables are turning now, but not in the way you expect. This is not about going back to what was taken. This is about stepping into what was withheld. Some places you thought you'd lost forever, you'll realize they were never yours to begin with. And the real spaces, the ones with your name etched in divine ink, are opening without you knocking. Because now, the assignment has shifted. The realm knows it, and the ones who tried to erase you, they feel it. Not because you said anything, but because heaven just moved you into visibility. No more hiding behind, I'm just healing. No more crouching in the corner of imposter syndrome. Michael says, the delay is over. The veil is lifted. And the seat you thought was broken has been reforged for you. You see, while you were recovering, heaven was re-architecting the battlefield. Not just removing your enemies, but restructuring the entire space so that when you walk in, you don't have to fight for respect. You radiate it. And yes, this is going to cause tension. Some who once outranked you in status will suddenly feel small, not because you became arrogant, but because your light is now undeniable. This is the divine promotion that comes without applause. It doesn't need a stage. It carries its own atmosphere. You are the assignment now, Michael says. Your presence is the activation. And wherever you go, systems will either bend or break. That's why the warfare has grown louder in your spirit, because the elevation is not ceremonial, it's functional. You're not stepping into a title, you're stepping into a responsibility. Heaven didn't give you a platform, heaven gave you a territory. And that territory has been crying out for your return. So don't delay. Don't wait for another confirmation. Walk in like the gates were waiting, because they were. You've been released. The embargo is lifted. The repositioning has begun. You thought your story disqualified you. Heaven says, your story is the strategy. And now it will speak for you, louder than anything you ever say. Archangel Michael steps forward, not with a sword, but with your scars. Because heaven has decided, you will no longer hide what happened. You will no longer apologize for your wilderness. You will no longer bury the chapters that broke you. The pain they caused will now preach, Michael says, not for pity, but for power. You survived what should have buried you. You carried wounds that nearly rewrote your identity. You sat in silence for seasons, carrying fire you were too afraid to speak. But now the silence is breaking. And heaven is authorizing your truth as testimony. Not the polished version, not the sanitized story, but the raw, sacred, burning account of survival, of betrayal, of resurrection. Because that's what terrifies the enemy most. Not your knowledge, not your platform, but your unapologetic survival. Michael says, every tear was recorded, every night of wrestling echoed in heaven, and now the very demons that stalked you will watch you testify. And when you speak, things will shift. Rooms will change. Chains will snap off people who've never heard your name, but their spirits will recognize your scars. Because pain carries frequency, and your story doesn't just inspire. It unlocks, it awakens, it reclaims. And yes, people will talk. Some will question your boldness. Others will accuse you of doing too much. But you're not speaking to impress them. You're speaking to liberate them. You are no longer the wounded, Michael says. You are the weapon. And every part of your story the enemy tried to shame you with, God is flipping it, redeeming it, launching it back at the darkness like thunder. That heartbreak, it's a sermon now. That season of lack, it's an altar now. That anxiety you couldn't name, it's a compass now, guiding others into peace. Because heaven doesn't waste suffering, it repurposes it. And if the enemy knew what you'd become on the other side, they would have left you alone, but it's too late now. You're not just back, you're dangerous. There's one last door, one final opening in the heavens. It's open now, but not forever. And Archangel Michael says, step through or stay behind. This is the moment the spirit realm has been building toward. All the recovery, all the repositioning, all the revelation, it has led here. And the gate that stands before you is not symbolic. It is real, it is holy, and it is closing. Michael says, heaven has held this door longer than protocol allowed. We have bent time for you. But even grace has structure. Even mercy has a window. What you do right now will echo longer than you imagine, because this is not just about breakthrough. It's about legacy. It's about bloodlines. It's about unborn generations depending on your courage. You were always meant to walk through this threshold, not as a beggar, not as a victim, but as a chosen one, marked in fire, wrapped in light. And yes, fear will try to speak even now. It will whisper, what if it's the wrong time? What if you're not ready? What if it's all in your head? But heaven has already confirmed it. You wouldn't be standing here if the invitation wasn't divine. And this time, delay is not an option, because the enemy is circling again. And this door is your escape and your elevation. You are not who you were when this began, Michael declares. You've been forged, tested, refined, and now only boldness remains. Step through and everything changes. Step through and the mantle fully descends. Step through and every false label, every lie, every wound will melt in the light behind that threshold. But hesitate, and the cost will not just be yours, it will ripple. Others who were tied to your rising will feel the delay. This is not pressure, this is prophecy. And heaven is still with you. But heaven is moving now. And to walk with it, you must move too. This is the last call, Michael says. The sky will not wait. The fire will not beg. The time is now. So step. Step afraid, step unsure, step trembling, but step anyway. Because beyond that door is the version of you that darkness never wanted to see. The version of you that was never erased, just delayed.